Hello, you may know me. My name is Martin Young. I'm the vicar of St Andrew's Church in the centre of the city of Norwich. And I would just like to share a few words with you from the Bible to encourage you in this time of the coronavirus. It's been a massive interruption to life and business, hasn't it? Many of us will have found ourselves sent home from our workplaces, struggling perhaps to keep work going at home. Maybe also trying to homeschool children, take on other responsibilities, perhaps for neighbours, separated from family, our social life interrupted, school, hobbies, everything has been interrupted. Probably the only thing that hasn't been interrupted is our viewing of, for some of us at least, of box sets. Now, Jesus' disciples had a similar situation when they were taking Jesus across Lake Galilee. Very ordinary situation, and we read this: a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. Now, these guys, the disciples of Jesus, they were fishermen. They were professional sailors. They were used to being out in all kinds of weather, and this was a serious and dangerous storm. They weren't just holiday makers who'd been swept off from Great Yarmouth Beach sitting on a pink flamingo inflatable. This was a serious problem. The boat was already filling, and it was all hands to the pump. And Jesus, well, the next verse tells us, he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now, you may feel like that now. You may feel like you are forgotten. You may feel filled with anxiety and worry. Certainly, many of us feel like we're bailing out, just trying to keep up with work, trying to keep our house and our work life afloat, trying to keep up with everything, trying to keep enough toilet rolls in the household, trying to stay afloat. And perhaps some of us feel like we're sinking under the weight of anxiety. It was a great surprise for Jesus' disciples in verse 39. The next verse, it says, "And Jesus awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." It reminds me of a time when I was helping out at a lunch club at a school, and some of the children had got very noisy. One of them in particular was quite a wild lad, had got really out of hand. But the head teacher walked in and just said a word, just said the name of this lad. Everyone went quiet. She had great authority, and he just followed as meek as a lamb. Well, Jesus has that sort of authority here, not to quiet a noisy classroom, but to quiet the wind and the waves. And the challenge for us, I think, is in the question that Jesus asks. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" There was a story in the paper just last week about a woman called Claire Nelson, who's a travel writer. She had been out in the desert in California. She had fallen, she had shattered her pelvis, and she was stuck in the desert with very little water, no mobile signal, very dangerous. And she says, "I was writing travel articles and living in London, which had always been the dream." The article goes on to say she'd spent years striving for this, but it didn't make her happy. She felt lonely and under constant pressure to show everyone, friends, family, colleagues, she was living her very best life. "I ended up in an awful cycle where I became depressed," she says. Thanks to social media, Claire Nelson was able to keep her depression hidden. She could put on a mask, the article says, and present an image of her life as perfect. "I was very lonely and suffering, and those weren't things I was admitting to anybody. So my Instagram was a way of hiding that. You can put out the best version of you, even if it is not the full version." A crisis often shows up the truth about ourselves and our lives, where our faith is, who we trust, who we depend on, and what's most important to us in life. Now, for Claire Nelson, her close shave with death has been life-changing. The article goes on to say her Instagram account is now more open and honest, and she finds she has more perspective on life. I've got this second chance at life, she says. So how much of it do I want to give over to worrying about things that don't matter? A crisis makes us think about what really matters in life and who we can really trust. And the great truth for the disciples that were in the boat in that time with Jesus, and for us today, is that actually Jesus had been in charge all along, even when he seemed to be asleep, not caring, inactive. He showed his power when he stopped the storm. But it was Jesus who said, when they set off, "Let us go to the other side." And the one who said, "Let us go to the other side," was the same one who then said, "Peace, be still," to the wind and waves. He was surely going to get them to the haven they needed. Now that left the disciples with a question. They ask, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" That's the question for us today, isn't it, as we face this crisis, how we cope with this crisis, how we deal with the rest of life, how we deal with death on the day that it finally visits us, whether it's near or a long time in the future, how we face eternity, will depend on our answer to this question, who is this man? If we think that he is just a man, well, then we're left with our anxieties. We're at the mercy of the wind and the waves, and there is no one who can control them. We're just a fleck of foam floating on the sea, on the waves, and no one is in charge. No one can protect us. We'll focus on ourselves, and our whole mind will be full of how we can look after ourselves and how we can get to watch the next box set that comes around. But if we recognise Jesus as the Lord over all creation, over the wind and the waves, he is the creator who has come down into his creation as a human being, then we will call out to him. Perhaps we'll say, "Don't you care that we're perishing? Won't you help us?" And we'll get the help that we need, just as the disciples did, to take them through the crisis that they were facing. And better than that, confident that he is in charge of all things, we can sleep soundly in our beds, just as much as Jesus was sleeping soundly in the back of the boat that day, confident that he's in charge and we're in safe hands. I hope you will consider reading Mark's Gospel for yourself. I'll be happy to pop one of those in the post for you. If you would like one, do get in touch. And if you'd like to talk about any of the issues raised in what we talked about today, then I'd be very happy to. Do give me a call.